everybody. I'm Mayor Lauren McLean. Thanks for joining us today for our December listening session. Of course, when we started these back in February, I had one live in person at a library. And then after that, we moved over to virtual listening sessions. I thought by the end of the year, we'd be all back together, but we've learned that we need a little bit more time. So continue to do these virtually, but look forward at some point in the coming year to being able to see people face to face in live listening sessions. I really appreciate that you've joined today. Thanks to those of you that sent questions in advance, and I look forward to hearing from others after we've finished with the questions that came in advance. I just want to start out by acknowledging, and thanking first off Lavona, who is here to sign for us so that these sessions are more accessible to more members of our community. And Lavona and Sierra have been with us all year, so it's nice to see them together one at a time, and we appreciate their service. And then to acknowledge that this is the last month of a year, so many of us put a lot of thought into what the year behind us looked like and was, and then of course what's to come ahead. And I want to acknowledge it's been a tough year, not just with regard to COVID, but the impacts that it's had, the changes in our lifestyle and the way we work and the way we visit and see family. All of that has had a toll. And particularly as we move through the holiday season, we're reminded of what we've had to set aside in pursuit of protecting our community this year. And so to all of you that have made sacrifices, I appreciate it. But this is also a time of celebration in our reflections. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this year has not just been about COVID. And we have worked tirelessly in this community to address, as we can, piece by piece, our affordable housing needs. We've made announcements around climate innovation and climate action that'll set us up for economic recovery and healthy, safe, and vibrant living for the years to come. We've looked at transportation in new ways. While fewer of us might be prone to ride buses right now, our numbers are still up, but we're also asking ourselves and working on other ways to move people from home to work by launching some work at the city around canal pathways. And so I just want everyone to know that our city employees have worked so hard in service of the city, balancing the needs of the immediate decisions we need to make and solutions we need to provide with our forever focus on what's next. And as we move into a new year, I'm really grateful for the partnership we've had with the community, the team of people we have here at the city, and I see light at the end of the tunnel. And as we've been able to move on initiatives that we care deeply about here at the city of Boise, I know we'll be able to do even more as we get through this public health crisis. And on Monday, I know many people that spend a lot of time watching Twitter videos and other news videos of the first vaccines to arrive. There were some given in Idaho on Monday, more will be given today and on Friday. And so that too offers us a glimmer of hope during this holiday season. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth, who has some logistics, I think, and then he'll run through the questions that I am going to answer before we open it up to YouTube. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Mayor. So quickly, I want to reiterate that we'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. For questions that are similar in topic, I'll try to kind of condense them for timing. I know we've got a lot of questions on COVID, so I'm going to kind of put those together. I won't read them verbatim. However, if yours is a question we don't get to, put it in the online forum on YouTube chat, and we'll try to get to it later. We're trying to answer as many of these questions as possible. Just include your name and the area of town that you're from, so we know that people aren't sending questions from Venezuela or Africa or wherever, and we can answer the ones that are from Boise here. I'll be turning my camera off as the mayor's answering questions so that you'll have the sign language, the American Sign Language interpreter side by side for everyone to be able to utilize that service. Thank you for joining us, and I'll start with the first question. We got a lot of questions about COVID today. One of the first things that people were curious about is, why are these rules in place? Why did you make the health order, Mayor?
Sure. Thanks for the question. There are a couple things that we need to remember in this. We have this month alone seen record number of new cases every day, and over 1,200 people in our state have died of COVID, and our hospitals are filling up. And we've been at this since the spring when the state shut down everything and had us stay home for, what was it, a month or 6 weeks, to ensure that we didn't have a giant spike at a time when our hospitals weren't prepared. We reopened, but with modifications of how we work and how businesses interact in order to protect public health, to attempt to do everything we could with the information we had at the time to keep our cases low. And unfortunately, we've seen a spike in cases this fall that we have to address. And the state has said local governments need to make these decisions. So when I hear from medical professionals and hospital CEOs that they don't have enough beds, they're concerned will be at crisis care levels by Christmas. And crisis care is a prettier way of like letting it be known that they'll have to ration care, decide who gets a bed, who doesn't, based on indicators they'll put together. When we've got hospitals in our community saying that they fear that we will be at crisis care standards and the rationing that comes with it by the end of the month, we're seeing an increased number of cases. And we've been told that local level decision makers need to make local decisions given the science at hand, then we're going to act. And so we've put into place, and we've had since July, a mask order. And then about a month ago, we announced a new way of enforcing our mask order that allowed us to partner with businesses. And what we've seen from that is that we've seen a bit of a lull in the number of cases. It's not to the point where we need it to be to ensure that hospitals won't get to that crisis point. But we've seen in the last week fewer people needing tests, a little bit of a pause in the rate of new cases. And we do wastewater testing that also shows us that something might be happening, that there was a reminder with our new enforcement program that we needed to be vigilant. And so as long as we are waiting for enough vaccinations that our community is vaccinated and safe, as long as the state says local leaders need to make these decisions and health professionals are saying we have a problem, and we'll continue to have rules in place because it protects our public health, it protects life, and that to me is the foundation of a strong economy. So it will help us recover in the long run. And right now with a masking order, keep business open rather than taking the drastic measures taken by the state back in March.
Thank you, Mayor. So the next question is also on COVID. Sherry from the Northeast End is curious about enforcement. She wants to know how the enforcement works and if there's anything she can do to help when it comes to enforcing COVID-related guidelines.
Hi, Sherry. Thanks for the question. Our enforcement program is designed, and it was something new that we decided to try because we knew we needed to do something. It is designed to partner with businesses because most of the businesses that are open out there these days want to enforce a mask mandate because they understand that having rules like a mask mandate makes it possible for them to stay open and to prevent the likelihood that the state does another shutdown. And so there are two ways that the order works. First off, if there's a business out of compliance, then our licensing team here at the city of Boise visits that business, inspects and talks with them about the consequences for it. And there's consequences for the first strike, the second strike, the third strike, and it all centers around licensing. And then the second piece is that for businesses that are working hard to enforce our mask mandate, if they have customers that have come in that are giving their employees trouble and refusing to put on masks, et cetera, we ask that they call the police because the police can come. And when a private business is asking the police for support and willing to partner with us, we can trespass those individuals for being in an establishment without the precautions that the business owner is requiring. So that's how it works. How you can help us is to frequent those businesses that are doing it right. If you have friends, colleagues, or even family businesses, make sure that they know that the city is here to partner with them to protect their employees, as well as the general public, so that we can keep our businesses open. And of course, if you have concerns, there's a non-police number where we're taking calls. We share some of those with Central District Health because they have a role in this. And then we connect with businesses if there are concerns. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Mayor. And we actually just received another question kind of on that same topic of how does the CDH decisions work with the Boise decisions and the state decisions? Seems like people are kind of confused about who's in charge of what here.
So a couple things. It would be the simplest if it was just a statewide rule, because then we'd have no confusion over who's in charge. But because the decision's been given to local governments and local health districts, there are two entities at play. Our local health district, Central District Health, covers the entirety of Ada County, as well as, I'm going to miss one, but I'm going to try, Valley County up towards McCall, Boise County, so Horseshoe Bend, Idaho City, and then Elmore County, Mountain Home. So that district covers those counties. If they make a decision, a ruling, they can either do it county by county or the whole district. And then our rules only cover the city of Boise. So if the Central District Health adopts a rule that's more stringent than our rules, we follow Central District Health rules and then work with them to ensure compliance. We can, as a city, pass emergency orders that are designed to protect the health and safety of our residents right now while we're in this pandemic. And if we make, say, a mask order, we adopted a mask order a couple of weeks before Central District Health. Ours was the rule for Boise City only, but then 2 weeks later, I think it was, Central District Health Board passed one for the whole county. So there's two. We look to the Central District Health Agency and Board to provide us with medical guidance, and really look to them to make the decisions that need to be made from a health basis, and then enact them here in Boise when needed.
Thank you, Mayor. And we had one more COVID-19 related question submitted beforehand. That was from Steve from the West Bench, and he's curious about why the city of Boise is sending code violation letters to the Idaho indoor shooting range in Meridian.
Oh, because we're human and we made a mistake. There's an area along the border between Boise and Meridian that just with zip codes and addresses, et cetera, can sometimes get a little fluid from a mail merge situation. And, we contacted the business when we heard it. First off, Meridian's, the mayor's chief of staff called to check in with us to make sure, to let us know what had happened. And we let them know it was a mistake. And then we reached out with the business as well. I mean, our orders are for Boise City, and that was just an honest mistake that it was sent out.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, get in the YouTube chat if you have questions and put them in there. We'll get to them after we get through the questions that were submitted beforehand. This next one is from Lindsay from the Central Bench. And she is curious, what concrete actions are you taking to protect our BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ communities that are most impacted by the events that are going on recently, including COVID-19?
Sure. So, even before COVID-19 and the calls to address racial justice and race equity around this country, when our administration came in January, we were committed to extending more opportunities for community engagement to marginalized communities within our community, to looking at how we name people to boards and commissions, and now we look to diversity as part of that. We've made a commitment from a staff perspective that we're going to provide them with the training they need to best support our desires to see boards and commissions that are reflective of our community, staffing within the city of Boise that's reflective of our community, because ultimately, the more we can do to engage with various communities within Boise City, the better off we are, because our community is stronger, because there's more opportunities for people to engage. So we've also, there are a couple things along those lines. So boards, commissions, diversity, equity, inclusion training within the city to equip our city leaders with the tools they need to create a safe, welcoming, and inclusive work environment. Our police department is now conducting implicit bias training. You likely saw, I think it was 2 weeks ago, our police chief came with policy changes that he recommends based on our council and mayor office values, as well as the community conversation that we've had around policing. And we look to new ways of recruiting within the police department to ensure that when they're recruited and trained, they're better able to build bridges and connect with marginalized communities within the city. And I also want to point out that when we talk about an inclusive community, creating a city for everyone, that there's so many communities within the city that we're building engagement opportunities around because we're committed to involving people, whether that be the refugee community, English as a second language individuals within our city, marginalized faiths, people of color. There's people that have chosen to come here as immigrants or refugees, and people in neighborhoods around the city. So as we seek opportunities to build those connections, it's with a commitment that our administration has to doing that. And then from a COVID perspective, we established a specific team within our emergency management structure to address the needs of marginalized communities, to prop up and support through funding and programming services for those experiencing homelessness. You'll see there's a new downtown day shelter downtown because we need folks to have a safe and healthy place to go during the day. COVID tests for those experiencing homelessness. We, in partnership with Interfaith Sanctuary, ensured that we had rooms that families experiencing homelessness could move to during the times of most concern with regard to COVID, including now, outside of the shelter to free up beds. So we created space for families to live and to be safer from a health perspective. We've also funded space to have for those experiencing homelessness who need to isolate because they've been in contact with somebody or have themselves contracted COVID, and we've propped up programming at our community schools to ensure that those kids whose parents have to get to work, who wouldn't otherwise have the support they need during the school day since it's remote, can come to our community centers, have an adult that's part of one of our community centers and support their educational needs in partnership with the school district. So, there's the concrete actions we took and we're so excited to take to ensure that we're, increasing dialogue and engagement with marginalized communities within Boise. And then there's all the COVID programming that we've developed as well, because we're committed to ensuring that those that most often feel the bruntest of the effects have the supports they need from us.
Thank you, Mayor. The next question is from Sarah from the Central Bench. It seems like a lot of people on the bench asked questions today, so good job,
great.
Bench. What are you doing to save Boise local businesses that no longer have the customer base that they had before COVID restrictions came in?
Sure. That's a great question. And my daughter and I were just talking last night about the businesses on the bench that we wanted to visit for some Christmas gifts. So we're going to be heading out there. I think it's Monday. But on that, the most important action that we can take to protect businesses and local businesses that tend to be smaller is to wear a mask so that our businesses can stay open. And we have remained focused and committed to taking steps that we believe make it more likely that our businesses can stay open. And in doing that, I believe our economy will recover more quickly in stronger ways as we get beyond this really tough time. We have established and recognizing that there just aren't as many people frequenting businesses right now. And we want to make sure that they know, that our residents know that it's safe to visit them. And having a mask order in place and some support around that is one very important step of that. We have CARES funding that was passed through to us from the state that we qualified for a certain amount. And while we had more costs related to COVID than what we could have reimbursed, because of that, there was a chunk of money that we had that we couldn't reimburse our own expenses. And so we used it to build a small business recovery grant program. And so small businesses throughout the city can apply for funding from us to help cover some of those costs that I know they have, or the lost revenue that I'm certain they have given the year. You saw downtown what we did with the Downtown Boise Association. That was a little easier because we oversee 8th Street, and we were able to shut it down in partnership with other government agencies and let that be open to create additional space. But we've also worked with businesses throughout the city, either to help them navigate a process where they can have a parklet in a busy street and other kind of downtown a need that's often more unique to downtown, or partnering with them to help them navigate the process to be able to use their parking lots to expand the footprint so that people feel safer. And I think finally, I want to point out that I joined and brought a team of employees with me, a Bloomberg Harvard program. You might have heard about the one because Boise Dev wrote about it around housing innovation, but they're also providing supports to select mayors around the country to think strategically through economic recovery and how we support locally owned businesses, minority owned businesses, et cetera. And so they're helping my economic development team be strategic and more impactful in the decisions we make. And some of these ideas that I've just talked about, we worked through with that team of folks. If you have suggestions, because you know firsthand what it is that would be helpful, I can't promise in advance we'd be able to do it, but I'd love to hear them. So if there are any small businesses listening, was it Sarah from the Central Bench has thoughts herself, please share them, because the more ideas we have, the more likely it is that we'll stumble upon something that would truly be supportive of our local businesses, because they are vital to our vibrant neighborhoods throughout the city.
Thank you, Mary. It was Sarah. And this next question actually kind of somewhat deals with the opposite side of that. Taryn, also from the bench, the West Bench, is concerned about growth.
Didn't hear. Sorry, did you say Sharon?
I said Taryn, T-E-R-A-N, Taryn.
Taryn, nice to meet you. Really,
yeah, they are worried about the growth that they've been seeing, and they feel like they're kind of being left behind as the city grows, whether it be jobs or housing prices or things like that. And they're curious what your thoughts on that are generally.
Sure. Our city has experienced exponential growth. I've talked a lot about that in 2019 and the need to get ahead of that growth from an infrastructure perspective. And quite frankly, that growth has made it hard for us and the wages as local Idahoans that have local jobs to keep up with the cost of living. And that's a feeling that's not unique to West Boise. Boiseans around the city are feeling that. And while we thought perhaps as the COVID outbreak came to be, as the governor did the stay home order for March, we thought maybe that growth that we've seen that's been just explosive in the last couple of years would slow down. But instead, what we're seeing is that people recognize that this is a great place to be in good times and in bads, and the growth rate in Boise has continued. So we need to address this from like a systems perspective. We know that housing, affordable housing, we need more opportunities for residents to be able to either rent or own housing that's like unique to their budgets, that fits a Boise budget. And that has economic impacts. When we have housing that's affordable, it helps grow the economy. So we have launched a portfolio of programs related to affordable housing, whether it be the land trust that we've established. We've picked up some land, and you've seen at Franklin and Orchard, we put out a proposal for, we put out a request for proposals around affordable housing at various price points. We are looking at an affordable housing overlay zone that would enable us to work with builders of homes to get more affordable homes built more quickly for our residents, as well as other things. So there's the housing component. In fact, my economic recovery task force said you've got to work with this community on affordable housing because it ties so closely to the economy. There's job recruitment and job growth. And as a city, our economic development team is working with a coalition of businesses that recruit and seek to bring more jobs here. And at the same time, we're working with incubators that provide supports to grow jobs here. So looking at it from like big that might come in, small that could be created and grow to mid-size or even large over time. And recognizing too that we have ways that we can encourage jobs that pay us what we need to be paid to live here by looking at the few incentive tools we have when it comes to permitting, et cetera, and the conversations we have around wage expectations so that our residents can afford to live in the city they're working in. We see climate innovation and a transition to clean energy as a way to build jobs and prosperity in the long run. All of these are longer plays, so know that at the same time, we are seeking ways to support the businesses that exist so they can continue to pay wages to our residents. from a growth perspective, we must keep up with growth. And what we've seen in this whole region is that in many ways we've fallen behind the roads necessary. We don't oversee roads, but we can influence them that create traffic and congestion. The placement of schools, fire stations, et cetera, that help us keep our neighborhoods localized as they always have been, to protect what we love about this place. And so, we're working right now with the incoming administration on the needs that we have as a city to ensure that we can provide clean water through our sewer program, that we create and set aside parks and open spaces throughout our city, that we build out a canal pathway that connects from farmlands to the foothills, our people to their neighborhoods. And all of that will, lessen the impacts of growth as well, because we're planning for the future and attempting to provide the services that our residents need at the same level as we continue to grow.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got a few more questions kind of on that growth idea. Richard from the Northwest has a lot of really interesting detailed suggestions on the housing bonus ordinance. Yeah, and then we've got another question from Robert also about housing related things. I was wondering if you could maybe explain kind of all the tools that we're using in the plan around trying to create affordable housing for folks.
Sure. So, and if it's Richard in the Northwest, who I think it is, Richard's on the committee that I'm about to reference, and that is our zoning rewrite committee. And that committee is tasked with engaging the public to get their feedback, and then to help us understand how we modernize our zoning code to ensure that in the limited land we have the homes that we need at the budgets that meet Boise budgets. And that's all price points. So we're looking and working through the zoning rewrite, which will be a multiple year process. City staff are calling this a housing bonus ordinance. I see that as a tool, and I hope to use it, intend to use it as almost like an affordable housing overlay zone in appropriate places where we delineate what it is the city is willing to negotiate in exchange for housing at certain price points. And that those price points are based on average monthly income and what our residents can afford. And I want to have that tool in my toolbox so that we can better negotiate when developments come to us, when infill projects come to us, when things are on transit corridors, and that's really where I see this as appropriate, come to us, that in exchange for a certain number of units at certain number of prices, we're able to offer you these things. And we need that because we need to have tools to do things now. I mentioned the land trust in a prior conversation. We have been very assertive in identifying pieces of land around the city and seeking to acquire them so that we can put out for proposal pieces of land that meet our guidelines that we develop. And in exchange for having access to that land on which to develop, we'd be able to delineate what we want to see: housing at multiple incomes and at set prices. Whether or not we want to use it to ensure that that it's built near transit corridors when there's transit in the long run, et cetera. So being able to control some land and through that to bring housing into the market that meets Boise needs are just some of the programs that we've launched this year.
Thank you, Mayor. Starting to get to the actual YouTube comments now. So put them in if you've got questions or comments or things like that as we move forward. Tony also from the bench is curious about internet connections and the access to broadband and fiber and what can be done to give some better options to the community.
Tony, I get a big smile on my face on that one because it's something I've been asking our team since January, before we even knew how important it was to have a wider network and access to Wi-Fi. To build out a system citywide is expensive. We're exploring whether or not we can do it as utility. The miles of fiber that we need and the cost that it would the costs incurred to do it, and so we have a better sense of what that looks like. The state had a rural broadband granting program through all their CARES funding they got from the federal government. Cities weren't eligible for that, and I've talked to the incoming administration about the importance of looking to broadband as infrastructure and helping mid-sized cities in particular, but of course all cities, be able to build out the infrastructure of the future, which is fiber broadband, so that our residents can work from home, as so many are now, and importantly, so that our kids have access that they need for school. And we've also started looking into whether or not it's possible to have Wi-Fi in parks or other public spaces, because what we saw, and it was on the bench, Tony, that I saw it first at, I can't remember which school I was at, but at a school, it was when school was a hybrid mode, but so kids were home half the week. Kids were at the school to use the Wi-Fi to be able to access their lessons and their teachers who were inside the building. And that demonstrated to me like the real need to have access to Wi-Fi for our residents throughout the city. So there's the broadband infrastructure play that we're trying to figure out how we fund and invest in, because it creates access to jobs and opportunity. And I believe it's just going to be one of those things you have to build an economy as we move into the future. And then we're also looking at potential for what we could do in the short term to make sure that more of our residents, especially those in less invested neighborhoods who have lower incomes that might speak second languages, they can go somewhere to access Wi-Fi in a public and safe spot so that they can either work as they need to, or importantly, the kids can get to school.
Thank you, Mayor. And we've got a couple more COVID-related questions that I'll circle back to at the end, because I feel like they may have missed at the beginning. But I wanted to get to some of the other questions that were on new topics. Jeff from downtown Boise is curious if the Boise Police Department has released a breakdown of their budget, and what that budget looks like, and what aspects go to kind of social welfare and that sort of thing.
Sure, Jeff. I'm going to direct you to their website, because they've just developed a dashboard that I believe will also have budget items. Seth, could you put the link to it's the city budget, and I don't know if there's a separate link for the police budget in the chat, or follow up with Jeff on that. The budget has been released because we had a budget workshop and a budget hearing this summer. And 2 weeks ago or so, the chief came forward to the council and previewed the policy changes he's proposing to make. We've just reviewed yesterday at the city council meeting the feedback from the public on those policies and what they'd like to see. And while he's reviewing those and making recommendations for policy changes, he's also developing a dashboard where the public can go and see the calls that are made, probably budget. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff within this dashboard, because we want to have open, transparent data that'll not only allow the public to see where money is being spent and what's happening in their community, but it allows us as decision makers to better allocate funds and make policy decisions. And so all of that will be online, if it's not already, shortly.
Thank you, Mayor. And Jeff, you should be getting that link very shortly here. We're getting that to you. The next question is from Kyla. Did not put a location in, but Kyla, and they're curious about the CARES money that's left over still in Idaho, and whether or not that's going to go back to DC at the end of the year. What can be done here in Boise with that money, if it's still possible?
So Kyla, I would suggest that you reach out to the governor's office, because it's the governor's office, that committee that he's established, and maybe there's some legislative engagement as well, that will make that decision around the funds. Idaho got an incredible amount of support from the federal government. And we're one of those states that doesn't have cities that are big enough to get direct support to cities. So you needed to be a city of 500,000 people in order to get direct support. So to get a whole bunch of funding like our state did. But it sounds like you know that, because you're asking if it's going to go back. So they will make that decision as to whether it goes back. I expect that many communities have needs that if the language around the use of the funding had been more flexible, that they likely could have had that. We have revenue losses that we haven't been able to recover, but that money is not. We can't use that money for revenue losses from operations. I mentioned earlier the rural broadband program that was out there. It would have been I would have been really interested in. I'd still love to have a conversation about whether or not there's potential to do something within this Treasure Valley region with some of that, if there were other interested leaders and the state was willing. And there are needs throughout the city that, expenses we've incurred because of COVID to provide the supports to marginalized communities, those more vulnerable, et cetera, some of which we get reimbursed, but not all of it.
Thank you, Mayor. And this looks to be our last general question, unless someone puts something into the YouTube chat quickly. How will the CDH decision that they made this week, the Central District Health decision, affect Boise? Will anything change? And what's kind of, if we can reiterate what we're doing here in the city of Boise, because we had a couple of questions that we're still curious about that from people who may have tuned in a little bit later.
Sure, we've incorporated the governor's modified stage 2 order, which limits group sizes, and Central District Health's current order, not the one that they didn't pass, but their current order that also requires masks in Ada County and limits group sizes, into our city order. And we have to have an order to then be able to guide the actions that we take. And so despite what happened at Central District Health this week, which would have made an order that was more stringent than ours, our current mask order remains in place. The gathering size of people getting together, capped at 10, remains in place. And what we announced was it 2 weeks ago? No, it was a month ago. It was a new way of enforcing that order because we needed to see an increase in compliance to protect against crisis care standards at our hospitals because they're nearing capacity, and to take the steps that we could as local leaders to protect public health when we were seeing a spike in cases. So the short of it, our mask order with our unique ways of enforcement in partnership with the business community, that was new for here, remains in place despite what happened, was it yesterday? At the days, every day expands, but despite what happened at the Central District Health meeting this week.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all the questions that we have. So I want to thank everyone for submitting questions. And I specifically want to thank the bench for showing up in such numbers today. That was awesome. And I wanted to hand it over to the mayor if she had anything to close.
The bench showing up is making me want to run up Vista right now and have a, oh my gosh, why can't I think of that name? That favorite thing that I love at the German deli, the breaded and fried Wiener Schnitzel. I totally want to go up there and have one of it now, just thinking about the bench. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. This is the end of the year. It's a special holiday season. So for those of you that celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. It was an honor to help light the menorah last night with the Fod Center at the State House in a small ceremony that was broadcast virtually. To those of you that celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all. There is an important through line in the celebrations that I mentioned too, with the various cultures that make Boise home celebrate this month and these darkest of days, and that is that connection to hope and to light. That light in darkness will lead the way. And so many of you have shown what that means this year, and I truly appreciate it. To those of you that have lost your loved ones, I'm sorry. To those of you that have done everything you can to keep us safe and healthy when we've had to come to the hospitals, I thank you. We will move through 2020 and into 2021. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and I remain so hopeful that as we continue to remind ourselves who we are, as we continue to show up and engage, whether it be in listening sessions and with our neighborhood associations, at council meetings through Zoom, to step up and stand up for organizations that have been the target of hateful actions, to support those in our community that are often marginalized. Through those actions, we'll remain true to who we are, and we will be a stronger community on the other side of this. And so I just thank each and every one of you for being an active and engaged citizen in our community in what has been a very unique and difficult year, and look forward to working together with so many of you in 2021. Take care.